It's a 4.5-inch Foden steam wagon, built to the pre-1932 design with the cast wheels. Took me just over 3.5 years to build from drawings. Basic castings was bought and machined, and it's a commercial made boiler, but the rest of it was all the timber work and everything was done in my own workshop at home. It's been finished now 5 years, valid, but it's getting ready for a paint job now. It's had quite an hard life over the last 5 years. I think it's the first love, and the missus will say that as well. She's into the second love, so yeah, definitely it's definitely the first love, and it's really a labour of love, and it's taken a lot of my life, and I'm still building others. So no, it's a third size. It's 4.5 inch to the foot, so it's classed as a third of the size of the full size. It's a Foden C-type wagon. It's the model of the long wheelbase Foden C-type wagon, generally used in the early 1900s as haulage. There's a few bushes and a few bearings that are ready for replacing now after 5 years, and they're getting a bit tired. We replace bits every year, but basically it's still as tidy as what it was when it came out of my workshop the first year. Still original boiler test. We do exactly the same as the full size lads. Still have to do 10-year pressure tests, or some clubs are on 7 years. This is on a 7 year, so every 7 year it has to be hydraulic tested and steam tested, and then a steam test every year within that 7 years. Really, it was a bit of a novelty idea. Was that there was never one built with a Foden, and we had a bit of a novelty that every rally we seem to go to, someone always seems to break down. So we thought, why not build a recovery truck this time? It's a bit of a novelty to wind everybody up, and it's probably turning out to probably one of the most popular wagons we've done. So
how long has that been in progress? It's not finished yet, is it?
No, not finished yet. It's been in progress 2 years. Hopefully should be finished next year, as long as we can get into it, but other jobs keep coming up, and we keep finding other faults with other stuff, so other work takes priority. But hopefully this next year that's going to be finished, and hopefully next year it'll be all been well next year finished. Yeah, everything's got to be smaller than fit. That's a little bit wider than what the original drawings was, because we widened it to make it look a bit more meaty for the recovery truck idea. So it is a little slight bigger than the original what should be as the 4.5. But otherwise it's more or less the same sort of thing. We designed that round the engine and the boiler really. Steady.
Right, when it was new in 1929, it was brought out as a 6-wheel steam wagon on solid rubber tyres. Then in the early 30s, after the Slater report, which effectively banned all solid rubber tyred steam wagons off the road overnight, it was sent back to Sentinel along with its sister wagon, 8018, back to Shrewsbury to be converted to an 8-wheel configuration on pneumatic tyres. Now then, after that, Tarmac ran it all the way through the war years until 1945. Its sister wagon was scrapped in 1944, and this one lasted till the end of 1945, when it was sent to a scrapyard and cut up. But fortunately, it wasn't processed. It was just cut up and buried under the war scrap. Now then, in the early 50s, a guy called Les Lamb, who was an engine dealer from Redditch, near Wolverhampton, found the remains of the wagon, and he bought what was left. And in 1989, I met this guy, Les Lamb, and I bought what was left of the wagon, which comprised of 4 axles, an engine, and a water tank, and that's all that was left of it. Now at that time I didn't realise what the serial number was of the wagon, so it was only through a bit more research that I found out exactly what the wagon was. So in 1992-93 I started to restore it, and it took me 28 years to get it into steam. It cost me dearly in the relationship department, but never mind, we'll not go into that.
So we're a family of 5, the Chick family, and we are driving around the whole of the UK coast on £10 a day to raise money for a charity based in Hull. So we started in Hull 88 days ago, and we've been driving right the way round. We got to Glasgow about 2 weeks ago. We had to go across to Hull to visit the charity, and then we're just on our way back to Glasgow and saw the signs for the steam fair and thought, we want to check that out, and here we are. We've been invited to stay for the weekend.
Tell me about the vehicle you're travelling in.
So it's a 1968. It was a Morris Traveller, and about 4 or 5 years ago, me and my son converted it into what they call a motor caravan. So now it's a Morris Minor motor caravan, and we're 5 of us sleeping in it for about 8 months. Our journey's going to be.
What's it been like?
Well, we've had lots of challenges mechanically. So on the road, because we're moving every day, it's been an even bigger challenge. So we've had lots of mechanical issues. New head gasket, wheel bearings, carburettor, hole in the axle we've had to have fixed on. So it's all been done on the road in the last 3 months. So that's £5 for our fuel and £5 for our food for all of us. So we tend to do about 30 miles a day on our £5 fuel, and then for food, we just started the day today with a big bowl of porridge made with water and a pinch of salt, and then we try and be a bit creative with whatever we can get, and shop around for good deals in the supermarket. Yeah, but we're managing, and people have invited us to dinner, and occasionally people bring us a bag of shopping, so we're doing okay.
Right, what I've brought just behind me here, I've brought a selection of Second World War equipment as would have been used on the Normandy landing since we're in the 75th year. The big Bren gun on the stand there is actually dated 1938. It would have been used at Dunkirk, Africa and Normandy, and I'm very proud to say I've got it. That's set up for anti-aircraft. The rest of it's just general equipment the soldiers would have had to carry through the sea to climb onto the beaches. And then we move along, and I've brought quite a selection of stuff used in Northern Ireland from 1969 to 2006, over 30 years of combat over there. And I think people should be brought to realise that all this is history, all of it. Well, with the Second World War stuff, I do travel the country. I go as far as Kent. I've been as far as Scotland with it. I live down in the Midlands near Coventry, and people are just amazed by it, by how much weight there was to carry.
It was built by a man called Ian Jenner from Middleton and Teesdale. Took him about 5 years to build, finished it in 2004. He rallied it for 4 years, and then at that point he'd built a 6-inch. Then it's just been parked up from then. We bought it 3 years ago. It was a half wedding present off Peter and Anne, and we got 2017, I think, 2016, 2017.
Yeah.
We rallied it last year for the first year. It's a Burrell 4-inch single crank compound, sort of mid-range at third size. Do a few road runs on it. It's not too bad. I've had a few little issues with it, but because everything's so small on it, it likes to brake a lot easier. But no, it's a pretty good engine. It's happy with it. It'll do 20 mile on the road. It's all right. We haven't had to do a lot to it. And
So Peter Bowron is your father-in-law.
Yes, he
so
is.
has he inducted you into steam?
Yes. Yes. Got dragged into it, but it's a good hobby. It's
Good family hobby.
yes, it's better than sitting on a computer screen, isn't it? They're much better engineered than what stuff is now.
On the CG125, it comes from London, and when it was 3 years old, the guy got told it needed an MOT, and he wouldn't pay for an MOT. So he put it in his garage at the side of a wall. One side is good, and the other side was rusty. And he left it there until I picked it up in 2007. So it was there in 1983. and it still had the original road tax, and it fired up once you had fresh petrol in. And I've done 6,000 miles on this now, and it's so small, it does 100 miles per gallon, and everyone loves it. It just plods along. It's what all the Japanese and Taiwan and Chinese, and they all love him. It's so simple. If it breaks down, you can repair it on the side of the road. It's got no electronic ignition, and it's still 6 volt. And that's the hardest thing to find, a 6 volt light bulb. You know, I've had to replace the light bulb, and that was the hardest thing to find. But this Suzuki was purchased 2 years ago. Nearly 2 years, for £500. Somebody just wanted to get rid of it. He'd bought it for 500. It was running, but on the way home, it developed a few problems like oil leaks and things like that. So I put it on my workbench, cleaned it up, sorted the oil leaks, and generally carried on with it. And I've done about 1,000 miles on it now, because I've got 7 other motorbikes, so I've got plenty to choose from. So I just use it as my everyday bike in a sense, but that one there for work, like, you know. GS 500E comes from America, really. It started off as a 425cc, and then it went up to 500cc, and as far as I'm aware, they're still making it in Japan. In various like cruise styles or whatever, but the Japanese love them because they can convert them to cafe racers. So it's very rarely that you get one in standard trim, and a lot of people don't like the white wheels and the colour of it, so it's not a popular bike. Because of my age, I'm 64, and I went for smaller and lighter bikes, and so this fits the bill. I can touch the floor in it. And it's quite good, you know, really, and it's good economy-wise, but road tax, you still have to pay the high price of the road tax for at least another 4 years, and then it'll become historic road tax, hopefully.
What year is it then?
91.
Old gentleman had it, been in his garage for a lot of years. He passed away. It was still stuck in the garage. It was left there, and his widow decided it was time to move it on. So a few months ago, I got my hands on it. I've been getting a garage for 13 years. So got it home, got it stripped down, a few little bits and pieces to it, and managed to get it MOT'd and back on the road. I'm back using it every day. It's a Suzuki FR80. It's 1980 when it was done. It's 39 years old. So it's been a good little bike to me. I use it every day for work. 80cc 2-stroke. 70 miles, and it cost me £3.60. So it is about 100 miles to the gallon roughly, yeah. Put a new swing arm on the back. We had to change the shockers. There was a few things because of its age, just with rust, that needed to be changed and sorted out. But in the main, as the bike is now, that's how it was when we picked it up. Like I said, just a lick of paint and general servicing and fixing, really. 1 or 2, like the swing arm was the main thing that needed to be changed just because of rust.
Tiny, it's a Fisher Holly van from 1963. It was made by 2 brothers down south, and obviously they went bust in the 80s. And it's the smallest caravan they did. It's called a Petite, and it literally weighs 350 kilogram, 450 fully laden. So most cars, Morris Minors, any car my little vehicle will pull it, no problem. So yeah, and it's ideal. It's supposed to be a 2-berth, but it's a very comfortable 1-berth. It was an ex-girlfriend's. She had it, and I saw it being restored, but she didn't do anything to it apart from doing the seats. And she just got fed up with it. I mean, she towed it with an Audi A4. It could have turned upside down. She wouldn't have known it were on back anyway. She wouldn't have felt it. She just got fed up. She said, you like caravans, don't you? I said, well, I've always had tents. I said, but I'm getting to that age now where a bit of comfort won't be a bit nicer. So yeah, so she sold it to me. So I've continued. I was trying to make it like an American diner inside, and just gone over the restoration and made sure everything were all right. I'm towing it now with a 91 Polo because my Beetle's clutch was gone, but I saw it with a 1966 Beetle, tiny Beetle. Yeah, when I got it, she said it was a 65, but the lad who restored it, Brian, one of the club members, he said, no, it's a 63. I said, are you sure? He said, yeah. I said, oh, that's even better. But yes, love it.
BMW R1100 RS, 16 valve this one. They made 1000cc first, Then they bored them out to 1100, and then they put 16 valves in them. They're a bit rapid like, but they're quite heavy as well. They don't half eat the miles like. This is a 1996 model. They went on to 2 cylinders, then back onto 2 cylinders. I think it's a road bike, sports tourer. That's how it was made. As long as nothing goes wrong with it, because you've got your shaft drive, so you don't need to bother with that. It's easy to maintain if you know what you're doing. You have to drop them, that's the trouble. When they're going, lovely. You can throw it about a lot, but a bit heavy to lift up. Like if you do happen to drop them, you don't feel any weight with them. They like really balance well. There is that about them. So you're going down the road and it's there's an out there, if you can understand that. Now I'm usually on my own a lot. So, but you can do miles in a day. You can do I could easily do 200 miles in a day. I've got my legs on, have you?
The steam engine gets through a significant amount of coal and water in use, and the operators clearly have to have ready access to both fuel and water. And the crankshaft, which is just in front of the driver, it's transverse across with a big spoke flywheel on the near side. Now that's characteristic of the general purpose or agricultural engine. These were used in a wide variety of functions, mainly in agriculture for ploughing and other work. You're doing a grand job. It's good to see the ladies having a turn at this. A 4-inch example of the Burrell single crank compound road locomotive. Now the road locomotive was basically the king of the road. These tended to be the biggest of the steam traction engines on the road locomotive, and it was used largely for haulage, and it would pull 2 or 3 trailers. If you look at the horizontal boiler as it goes past, underneath there appears to be a square box. Well, that's an extra water tank, and it's transverse right under the boiler to the other side. Now, Foden are quite well known to many people in the commercial vehicle world for their internal combustion engine wagons, but obviously they started much earlier than that, and they were very, very popular manufacturers of steam wagons. And this would be an example of an early steam wagon. The same horizontal boiler as the big traction engines, a smokestack right at the front. You can see that the wagon had a little canopy, and in full scale that would just provide a little bit of weather protection for the crew that was operating the wagon. Is another lovely example, 4-inch scale of the Burrell single-cylinder general purpose engine. What was I doing last, talking about single-seaters? There we go. So again we can see the cylinder block up on top of the horizontal boiler, smokestack in front, big smooth, spoke flywheel there next to the driver's left hand. Now, I was talking earlier and saying that these engines had a whole range of uses, hence general purpose engine. It's good to see. It's just rock that one to get it on top dead centre, and away we go. Now this one's standing on solid rubber tyres, and that's quite in keeping with the period that these wagons were being made. That's the early 20th century, late 19th century in some cases, but these were sort of early 20th century. Solid rubber tyres on steel artillery wheels, driving through to the rear axle by chain drive. These boilers have to be inspected annually by an independent, competent engineer. And that engineer will come along when the engine has been stationary for a while and the boiler's cool, so he can inspect it inside thoroughly, all the boiler tubes and the casing and all the auxiliary equipment on the boiler. And if he's satisfied with that, he'll make an appointment to come back when the owner has the engine in steam, and he will recheck the boiler under steam. This one's standing on pneumatic rubber tyres, but again with that lovely horizontal boiler. And just see the steersman working through the rear of the cab. Quite capable of taking a significant payload of these miniature engines, and this one again a 4.5-inch scale, driving through to the rear axle by chain. Now these owners may well have started with a part built, or will have gone right back to basics and started with the rope castings And here we have a beautiful example of a 4-inch Boral. Boral were major manufacturers of steam traction engines, and here we can see the Showman's engine with the smokestack extension in, the long canopy over the mechanism. It'll be twin cylinder, compound engine, a large and a small diameter a pair of cylinders, steam injected into the smaller diameter one first, and then recirculated through the larger diameter one. So they were ahead of the game in terms of making maximum use of the energy. Next one up is an engine coming from Foster's. Foster's again, big manufacturers in the east of England, down the eastern side with large arable land available. Traction engines being used for threshing during harvest time and for ploughing work were very, very popular. And so a number of the manufacturers were over on that side of the country. Not too many up in this part of the world because of the narrow little lanes and steep hills that we will be traversing. So another lovely example there, Foster's example. It's nicely turned out. It's a good looking working engine on solid rubber. Now we're down to a 3-inch scale. This makes it much more portable. Again, it's an example of a Foster single cylinder general purpose engine. We can see the big sport flywheel just in front of the driver's left hand, and the crankshaft on which it's running is transverse across the top of the boiler, connecting rods up to the pistons inside the cylinder block, which is just behind the chimney stack. A lovely example of the Clayton and Shuttleworth. So we're seeing all of the major manufacturers. We've seen Foster's, Foden's, Burrell's. I think there's a Fowler here somewhere, and so most of them are around. We can see as this one comes past, you'll know this commentary as well as I do now, single cylinder on top, but look at the smokestack. There's a little grate on top of the smokestack. I wonder what that's for. Well, it's a spark inhibitor, a lovely example with a purpose-built, custom-built trailer there. And the young man on just showing that it would take that load absolutely in its stride. I would think you'd get at least 3 people on that trailer and it will still be chugging along without any trouble at all. Nice canopy, beautifully coach painted and lined out. Look at the spokes in the wheel, all nicely painted with the sort of gold coach lining in there as well. And same with the boiler. Now, people sometimes think, oh, these things are all overstated, they're all shiny and nice. Well, a lot of engines were, because when it was on the road, this was your advertising billboard. It's a bit like some of the big haulage companies. Their fleets are always immaculate. Away we go. Now that's, if you're going to make a start in life, you come and exhibit at the steam gathering, and one day you'll progress on to something else. So he's doing well as the young man. Give him a round of applause as he comes past this little fella. Now Dad's here on a very nicely turned out example of the road locomotive. The cylinder block there with its 2 pistons inside, the large and small diameter. Underneath the horizontal boiler you can see the boxes, well the belly tanks as they are. It's a one big tank that goes under there, extra water on board. Very nicely turned out. Road locomotive, like the Showman's engine, large diameter wheels, front and rear, to give it the long range and speed that you would want on the roads. It's a 4CD, and the 4CD was a very popular engine used for a variety of things. You can see again very much in the style of the road locomotive with the belly tanks, the large diameter wheels front and rear, compound engine, twin cylinders in other words, and the big smooth flywheel, heavily decorated with brass, all nicely polished and beautifully coach painted. Lovely example again, making its way around. Very period wheels too. So that's a 4CD Garrett. No, I'm not sure if we've got a full-size 4CD Garrett here this weekend. The miniatures tell us an awful lot about the steam traction world. There's a tremendous amount of skilled work goes into putting these together and maintaining them. Again, we've got the big smooth flywheel, the belly tanks underneath. You can just see that. If you look between the front and rear wheels as he goes past under the boiler, that's the extra water tanks. Very, very important because they get through gallons of water to generate the steam they need, and to do that they get through tons of coal. So, you were stopping fairly frequently at the step. It's a 6-inch Savage, so quite a rare thing, known as the Little Samson, 5-ton steam tractor. Now the steam tractors, this is a 6-inch scale, so we're sort of coming up in size dramatically. The steam tractor, we will be seeing some full-scale ones, was introduced at a time when the horse-drawn lobby were lobbying fiercely against these monstrous juggernauts coming on the roads, these steam-driven traction engines, complained about the noise and the damage they did to the surface, and we've heard it all very recently, haven't we? As articulated trucks got bigger and bigger and come down your lanes and break up all the road surface. So the steam world were very quick then to come up with some new designs and reduce the size of the engines. Now another 6-inch scale. This one of the Borough Road locomotive. Away you go. Beautifully turned out, deep maroon, all the brasswork, nicely polished, heavily lined, stars on the casings. So a good example. If you look as it goes past, just on the rear of the engine, inside the near side rear wheel, there appear to be 2 vertical silver cylinders. Those are the guides through which a winching rope could be paid out. So here we've got a full-length canopy right up and past the smokestack, and you can see the shape at the top of the smokestack would take an extension. The extension on some engines would be mounted, just lay on the roof until it was needed. Big smooth flywheel there, beautifully painted. And that again is balancing the engine in motion, but of course parked up it has the dual purpose that you could attach to this engine by means of a big flat leather belt round that flywheel onto a pulley, onto a threshing box, stone crusher, saw benches, so making them very, very useful. Now this is very well presented in terms of detail. Johnson's at Banks, and Banks is down it's broadly between Preston and Southport. It's near Southport to Preston, but it's out in that big horticultural area, and they were well known in years gone by for their steam traction engines, and were very early into the preservation movement and developed a good reputation for saving engines that were heading for the scrapyard. We're coming up in scale again. This one from Aveling and Porter. Now, Aveling and Porter were world renowned for their steamrollers, but their engines were used for a variety of purposes. And here we can see, so let's start at the top, the full-length canopy all the way along, big brass knurled supports for it, all beautifully polished. In front of the smokestack, sat on a bracket, is a big dynamo. That dynamo, you can see, has a leather belt coiled up onto it. Now that dynamo would power the lighting on the engine, which is around the edges of the canopy, but it would also provide power for a fairground ride. And so when that engine was parked, that leather belt will be unfurled, it will be mounted onto that flywheel, and with the engine running, you will be generating electricity through the big dynamo. So with a showman's engine, you will invariably see a canopy going the whole length of the top of the engine, past the smokestack, and over that bracket which mounts the dynamo on it. So that's very important, and then you've got these beautifully presented engines, all superbly coach painted. So the showman, like the big road haulage companies, he was a showman. He put on a show, and his engine was part of the show. And a nice example of the big road locomotive. These were very often converted to showman's engines. And this one, no big dynamo on, so it's not going to be powering fairground ride necessarily. But it does have the full canopy, and this canopy does have the canvas covers, which can be rolled down at the front and all the way along the sides to protect the engine when it's parked up outside, overnight anywhere. It just protects all the working mechanisms on top. Again, as a road locomotive, like the showman's engine, very large diameter wheels front and rear. This one's got a lighting set on for driving at night. It's got the big belly tank underneath the horizontal boiler. Nice flywheel there, beautifully decorated. And again, as this one goes past, you'll see just inside that near side rear wheel, the two vertical rollers. That's the guide. And if you look just inboard of the near side rear wheel, you'll see where the winching drum is mounted. Bowers building these engines for so many years. They've got a full set of smoked crew here, all with the appropriate tweed caps and sooty faces. They've been working hard cleaning that engine all morning and got all the muck on themselves, which is what apprentices are for, if you're not shoving them up a chimney. But they've got to run out, before anything happens, they've got to start in the morning, clean the firebox, open the front of that boiler, run out all of the air tubes through the boiler itself, get everything clean so it's going to run efficiently, get that fire started. So again, with a road locomotive, this is a cracking example. Big diameter road wheels, front and rear, belly tanks underneath for the extra range, big smooth flywheel, and the canopy running just to the rear of the smokestack. No point taking it any further forward because there's no dynamo there for the fairground rides. And it's a compound engine, that's two pistons in the cylinder block. The steam is initially injected into the smaller diameter one and then recirculated out through the larger diameter. So way back there, worked out the advantages of compounding on the engines, and you could have triple and even quadruple compound engines in various configurations. And marine engines were very often in that sort of higher configuration. Used as a timber tractor, so it will be used for winching timber out and hauling timber out to forestry areas. Relatively short wheelbase, standing on these beautiful steel artillery wheels with solid rubber tyres, and chain driven through the rear axle. Horizontal boiler, I think, it's just gone past me, I think it's horizontal with a smokestack right at the front, and a decent cab on here to give some all-weather protection for the crew. It would get quite hot in there, I have to say, sat on top of that boiler near the firebox, so a little bit of ventilation is needed. But you can imagine these things were driven through blizzards and on cold, frosty days, and there's rain slashing in as you went over Shap Fell with a haulage train behind you. In the First World War, there were still literally hundreds of thousands of horses being used for haulage up to the front and for transporting troops. There were one or two internal combustion vehicles. Curiously, Rolls-Royce was active at this time, and he wasn't just providing staff cars for the brass, as it were. They were providing rolling chassis onto which a variety of bodies were produced. So these wagons were in direct competition with the incoming internal combustion engine, but there were many of them about. They were very robust, as you can see. Now, steam wagons developed, and they became very smart, smooth devices, and at the front of the design era was Sentinel. Sentinel, who produced a whole range of steam wagons, becoming quite famous. And this is getting towards the end of steam wagon production, and now we see it standing on pneumatic tyres. It's driving the rear axle through a prop shaft. The boiler is vertical and behind the crew, so it's just to their rear. In the tarmac livery, I, some years ago, saw pictures of this when it was completely derelict, and Tarmac acquired it. I'm not sure whether it was in a corner at the back of their yard in Wolverhampton, but anyway, they acquired it. It went through a long period of restoration to get it onto the road. Here we can see the additional auxiliary water tank is mounted just behind the cab and in front of the flatbed. Now, the characteristic of steamrollers, so it was the steamrollers, the road locomotives, and the showman's engines that tended to have the big smooth flywheels. Now that's interesting. That young man has just given us an indication of the audible warning that all these engines have to have. And it's a bit of mythology, I think, that steam engines have to have a man walking in front of them with a red flag. Brass headlamp rings. You can just see underneath the boiler the glow in the firebox, below the firebox, collecting the ash as it comes past. Like the 8-wheeler, it's got the extra water tank, and that's the little power steam wagon Many of these wagons are exported all around the world, and the little 9031 power is Sentinel S6, which is a dealer body in it. Fine work on this mill, just sitting there and towing away, powering back through those rear axles. It really is a splendid sight. Built in 1924, nice big smooth rolls front and rear, again the big smooth flywheel. Looks like the weather's just rolling in on us, so we'll let these lads run, because a steamroller on wet grass has great problems with traction, so watch them go. And here we've got the Roby tandem roller. The rolls fore and aft in line, so a tandem arrangement. See the big chain drive to the rear. Belly tank underneath for the extra water capacity, and the horizontal boiler just slightly tilted. Built in 1937, the steam tractor, as I say, very versatile. I was saying earlier, deceptive. And again, from Mr. Hubbard's stable, now up in Northumberland, going very nicely, beautifully turned out as ever, black with his gold and red lining on the casings and on the spokes. Versatile engines. This is the Little Foster, who worked really hard for us this morning. Between 9 and 10 o'clock, when the arena's empty and there's nothing scheduled, we try and get some of the steamers in to give rides to people, so they get the chance to ride up on the footplate. A lovely Sentinel wagon. This is a Super Sentinel from 1924 with the cab. The boiler's vertical, it's in front of the crew. Smoke box, it's a firebox down by your toes to keep them warm. Driving through the rear axle here.
Now, why on earth would you need a man walking in front with a red flag when they can make that noise, eh?
A brutal type, but for 20 odd years I've been building one, and I'm copying a preserved engine, so I had to make a lot of special bits. But unfortunately now I've got to days where I think I'll pop my clogs before I get it finished. Well, it's 30-year-old now, and it'll have been to about every Cumbria steam gathering, apart from one. We went to Bergen in Norway to a rally, and we sailed out of North Shields on the Sunday of this rally, so I had to write and tell them and I missed that rally. But apart from that, I first started going to Cumbria steam gathering when it was in Kendal. I've re-tubed it 3 times, new tubes in the boiler. I think I've renewed the chimney twice, brought it away, and I've renewed the smoke box once, and apart from that, been not much problem at all really. Yeah, we have to have a steam test every year and a hydraulic test every other year. When the hydraulic to 1.5 times its working pressure, well, that's working pressure, and that is 105 psi. One exploded in America, full size one, and it killed about 6 people. You know, the owner was one. He died eventually, and they put it down to the inquest. They put it down to a faulty safety valve, but the boiler was also very thin, and they don't have as strict regulations as we do. But the scalding, the water would scald you, but you have built-in safety things. You have a fuser plug in the top of the firebox, and if you have no water over it, you've got low on water, the high melting point lead melts, and all the steam comes out and puts the fire out. And it's very effective as well. The chap had that happen last year at the rally, and it cleaned all the ash and everything out the ash pan. And it certainly worked, but you have to have 2 methods of putting water in as well. So one's like a pump that's going all the time, and the other one's an injector. They're pretty safe if if you handle them properly, but it's like everything else. If you don't drive the car properly, it's dangerous. This is just the same.
It's a half-size Bull Road loco, built it in 12 months. First year out, and first year at the show here. Building it, there's lots to do, there's lots to build like on them. Lots. When you think they're finished, they're not, and you need another year to build. Even painting it takes a while, it takes a long time. I just got the raw materials and built it. Yeah, I don't know, I've built a good few in the past, so it wasn't that hard. But there is a lot to do on them to make. You've got to have a hydraulic test and a boiler test every year. Yep, and then another hydraulic every 10 years. So, and boiler lagging off and things like that every 10 years. So it's quicker to build a new one.
Yeah, it's the first time it's been to Cumbria. This is the furthest north we think it's ever been in its life. Well, it was built by Foldens of Sandbach, ordered by Hertfordshire County Council, and it was used for light haulage for them. So it would pull either one trailer, fairly substantial trailer, or Foldens did sell them with two small trailers, two little drawbar trailers. So yeah, that's what it was used for. Current owner, Mark Wilkinson of Hambleton, has had it for about 5 or 6 years now. The current owner, when he bought it, I think he's had a new water tank made for the back, and he's done a little bit of boiler work. The previous owner was a bloke called Albert Fensom, and he was down Oxfordshire way, and his family ran these. They had a timber haulage business, and a lot of these were used in timber haulage because of the size, the strength, and the huge great winch under the back axle, which for timber haulage is ideal. They would pull a pole trailer behind them, and using the winch they would be able to load the trunks onto their own pole trailer, so they were ideal for timber haulage.
What's it like to drive?
Beautiful.
Is it?
Yeah. As steam engines go, it doesn't get any better than this. You've got Acumen steering, you've no chain link steering like most traction engines. You have a foot brake and a hand brake. There's 4 brakes on the back axle, so you can stop pretty much as quick as any other traction engine. You've 3 gears, you're on a cushion seat, you've a windscreen, you're a nice high position, it's relatively short, it's got a very good turning circle, it's fabulous to drive. And this will do 60 mile on a tank of water. There's not another traction engineer that'll do that. It would have been the bee's knees in the day, but they're now a highly desirable engine to own. This is a 1917 steam wagon built by Foldens of Sandbach. Foldens had entered some war trials in 1904, 1905-ish, and they'd done very well. But in the early 1910s, the War Department had decided that steam wasn't the future, and they went to diesel. They went to war in 14, obviously, and they were struggling with the internal combustion engines. So they got hold of a bloke called Scammell of Watford, who obviously later became quite famous himself, and they asked him to find as many steam wagons as he could for the war effort. Scammell looked at the 1904, 1905, I can't remember when it was, war trial reports, noted Foden had done exceptionally well. He went up to Sandbach, saw Mr. Foden, said, I want everything off this production line now to be for the war effort. This actually started out on the production line as a steam tractor ordered by whoever, but the War Department spec'd it as a wagon with a tipping body. I think they ordered about 100 tippers. We think this is the only one left. After the war, this stayed in France and worked in civilian use by a farmer. When he'd finished with it, it ended up at the back of the barn, and a fella called Dennis Brandt got wind of it in the 1970s, went over to France, did a deal with the family, brought it back, and he restored it to how you see it now.
1951, Mr. DK. The D is for the model of the engine, and the K is for paraffin, because it started on petrol, so runs over onto paraffin then. So here they're saying K is for the kerosene. It's a 2 horsepower engine rather than the normal Lister Ds, which are 1.5. To create pressure into the lance, and they would all go around spraying orchards with it. Well, usually on these Lister Ds, they're quite simple kind of engine. You can strip one down in around about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Usually take them to pieces, right start from the piston, make sure your piston rings are all sorted out, then just build it up from there. It was found in just a local scrapyard was this, but as long as they're complete, they don't take a lot to get running. The water pump that was found at a Heathersgill rally many years ago when it was on Warwick Bridge. There was a gentleman walking past and he was taking it to the auction. And the owner of this engine and the water pump then decided to ask him where was he taking it. And he says, well, I'm taking it to the auction. So no, just leave it here, I'll make you an offer. He accepted the offer, Bob's your uncle, sold.
Okay, so we have 4 camels here today, as you can see. So we have Blizzard, Baxter, Bertie and Max. And we live on a farm in Warwickshire, on a private farm with 8 of our camels altogether, so we brought 4 here today. So camels do come from the desert, but they actually come from all over the place. So Bertie originates from Russia, which is why he's white. Camels adapt very well because you have to remember it's very cold in the desert. So naturally, you know, being here isn't really an issue for them. They love the snow, they don't mind the cold, and we are very precious about them anyway. But they do adapt very, very quickly because they're just those sort of animals. Their humps actually contain fat, literally like solid white fat, and they use it as a food store. So as they go through the desert, they use this fat, and that's why camels' humps get smaller. I absolutely love racing camels. It is great, great fun. They can be a bit cheeky, they can buck sometimes, so that's quite fun for us and the audience. And you know, it's just fun for everyone to see them. They're lovely creatures, they're very curious beings. Yeah, no, racing's great fun, and we get up to quite some speed sometimes, so you know, it's all thrills and spills, as you may say. Everyone says camels are known for spitting. Actually, spitting's a self-defense mechanism, so if they're threatened or angry or just particularly grumpy that day, they might spit. But
speaking of two-stroke Suzukis, here's one that I always wanted when I were a lad. This is a GT500, which is big twin-cylinder two-stroke from the mid-70s. They actually made this machine for about 12 years, which for Japanese was remarkable, to knock out a broadly similar big two-stroke machine without many alterations for a full 12 years, when you consider that they used to change most of their machinery every 2 or 3 years. T160 from 1976. When we got to the end of the British motorcycle era, the final flourish was the BSA Rocket 3 and the Triumph Trident. 2 very similar motorcycles, but at that point BSA and Triumph were more or less operating out of the same factories, and their machines were very similar. T160 was the sort of last hurrah of the big Triumphs.
Right after the Second World War, we had a long and successful career as dispatch driver during the Second World War. And again, research and development. They carried on churning out matchlises and indeed AJSs based on the same 350cc machine right up until the 60s.
I've got a 4-inch Clayton and Shuttleworth agricultural engine built in 1998. It then went from Scotland down to Urmston, where I purchased it back about 6 years ago. Found it on a website called Live Steam Models for Sale. Signed up to that and just kept looking on there. It just ticked a few boxes. There wasn't many of them around. Still haven't seen too many of them around. There's at least another one, but I don't know of any more that are around in the 4-inch scale. Interest came. We, as a family, we started off in buying diesel locomotives when I was at the age of 13. As that came along, we went from diesels, and they were doing various other events around that miniatures were, and they always just seemed to fascinate us. So we decided, as a family again, that we would go out and try and find a miniature that ticked our boxes. And whilst we bought this miniature, we went out and bought a 9F at the same time. It's gone from fairly small scale right up to the very biggest, really. But obviously the only traction engine we've got is this one at the moment.
The Manchester belonged to a friend of mine who stored it in a container, dismantled, and eventually I managed to persuade him to sell me it after about 7 years, which I then started and completely rebuilt it myself. They were built in Heaton Chapel in Manchester, and it's a 1929 model, and there's only 8 of them we know of left in the world, so it's quite a rarity. And it still has its original engine. It's an American engine. It's a Lycoming engine. Lycoming were famous for making aircraft engines and not truck engines. They weren't very reliable, so many didn't survive. And they were built by a consortium of Willys Overland and Crossley Limited. So the parts from Crossley and parts from Willys Overland, and also proprietary American engines and axles, things like that, of American origin. It will start, no trouble off the starting handle. I ran it for quite a lot of years without a starter motor because I couldn't find one, but eventually I managed to. So it will start electric start now. It's only designed to carry 30 to 3,500 weights. They were mainly used for small deliveries. This one, somebody said it had been used in the Lancashire area by a coal merchant, but I haven't been able to prove that. It has rear wheel brakes only. So it's quite easy to stop, especially if the roads are wet, because it just wants to slide. They're not very effective, put it that way. I wouldn't like to put 3,500 weight on it and try and stop it. Models were fitted with front wheel brakes, but you had to pay extra if you wanted those fitted, which is about an extra £3, 6 shillings at the time. They are 6 volt, yes, and they're not very bright. You don't take it out in the dark. It was a working truck in the day. You were going from a horse and cart to a vehicle that had an engine and a cab, so you had some protection. It's quite quick, but it's very noisy and very hot.
Right, if we came across this in this situation, we would have been called out. We'd have some prior notification. Yes, in this instance, we've actually laid it on its side for a demonstration, but we would get called out to right this vehicle and clear the road. The conditions we've got today are probably quite what we're accustomed to. At least it's not hailing and snowing, which we normally get to work in. We've rigged all this up. We've done a lot of the preparatory work to shorten the time. We've rigged it up so this truck on my right will winch it back over to the point of balance. The other truck on the other side will then take over and lower it down on a controlled lower, so there's no sudden impact. It's just all nice and gradual and correct, so no damage should occur. We've also got this anchored to the legs on the other one. Because we're on slippy grass, it would stop it sliding, so we've got it anchored. There's a lot of work gone into preparing this to make it safe and correct to do a proper job. We enjoy doing these jobs. It's like putting something back to the steam gathering that we've enjoyed over the years. It's nice that a number of people have come to watch us do this. I know that the weather's a bit off for them. To do a job properly, there's so much work involved in setting it up that not everybody's going to see that. We spent quite a few hours this morning doing the rigging to making sure that we were happy with what we were doing, so then people can just see the actual movement of the unit and trailer. We've connected it all as one. It's a rigid lump as this at the moment, because quite often you would pull a trailer up and the unit will cock at 90 degrees. They'll turn and slip on the fifth wheel. We've got this cross-chained together. There's as many, shall we say, safety features that we can incorporate that we've done on that job. On the road, you're working under more of a time pressure, and you'll do things differently. If I came to this on the road, I'd be rigging it up slightly different to what I'm doing now. Because I've had to rig it to actually take it over from its standing position, that's one of the worst things. Bringing it back up is actually fairly easy. I can bring this up easier than what I'm doing, but I need the extra rigging because I've got to take it over first. I could have put some airbags under it to lift it up and then taken over with the winches. I can chain to the wheels or the chassis, whatever, but we just thought it was more impressive by having it standing to start with, putting it one way, then bringing it up so it's back correct as it should be. Wagons and commercials are what we specialise in, but we do get quite a lot of agricultural jobs. You know, tractors which break the drives or get at a funny angle and they've got no drive, they can't get themselves out. If they move, they're going to fall over. That's when we, again, winch and rig up and winch them correct. Or even a machine. You get excavators which will just topple one way, and you need to be getting in certain positions to get them out, or if they go down in a bog, that can take a couple of days on some of them jobs. It depends on how bad it is. Yeah. But we look forward to them jobs.
Tractor pulling is always an exciting thing to see, and demonstrating the power of the tractors of yesteryear.
Let me run, hang on. I'm going to be really quiet, but I don't bust them. Max has a secret, everyone. He loves cake. I know you wouldn't know looking at him because he's on the petite side, but yes, he absolutely loves cake. Don't ask how I found that out. It was completely by accident. Max is a bit feisty, ladies and gentlemen. Max likes to buck a bit. This could be a little bit fun to watch today, but he's also very speedy. He actually won. Now he is riding Blizzard. Blizzard is a 7-year-old factory cow. Now Blizzard, ladies and gentlemen, is very cheeky. Blizzard has what I like to call little man syndrome. Yeah. 3, 2, 1. Warm up race of the day. Okay, and they are coming down the track. Baxter fighting through Bertie and Blizzard. Hold on, come back, keep going. And it's a win for Burton. He's such a show. I wouldn't care. His ego's too big anyway. Okay, let's get you guys back to the top. 2, 1, let's go! Here they come, guys. Come on, cheer for your boss' favourite camel. Baxter is bucking. You hold on there, Joe. And it's a win for Bertie and Maddie. Oh, slower than horses. Okay, well, I'll take that as encouragement. Guys, give them some cheering. What you have to remember is 7 foot up, 7 foot down. And that is not true. The humps are full of fat. Literally white, solid fat. And it's one. And they're off. Blizzard in front. Here he goes. Come Maddie in back. Bertie made it. Come on, Bertie, Maddie. Oh, Mads, you almost had it. But I mean, you still got 2. How do you feel? I'm good, because it was a close second. Oh, it was a close second. They ask us questions. They don't bite. They want to say they. I mean, the camels, I can't.
their engines became more and more efficient, that steam wagons and steam rollers were still being built until the late 1930s down the town or place to place. They could stop, unroll the hose to the nearest stream, river, reservoir, water drop. Smell would waft across the landscape, and you would immediately compare it to the town or house, living on some very days. Great to see. We really do a very nice line of just outside the river.
Yes, away from that then, one down.
Ladies and gentlemen out here in the middle of the arena, thank you very much. We do appreciate it, and you know, I'll never forget seeing two men running alongside an engine and jumping on as they came into the arena. It's a highlight of my weekend. Thank you very much. They are slightly different. The six-wheeler is just a little bit younger than the eight-wheeler, and the giveaway is, well, where's the vertical boiler? And on the six-wheeler, it's in the cab, but just behind the crew. On the eight-wheeler, it's in the cab and just in front of the crew. And then that gives the later one a much easier mechanical linkage down through the prime movers in the engine block over to the rear axle. Both of them stand on pneumatic tyres. The earlier wagons, and one or two little Fordens here this year, they're usually on solid rubbers and in some cases still on solid steel rims, and that's why it's so difficult for to travel on wet grass basically and wet land. I'm hoping for a great afternoon here down on the show field. Enjoy your rest of your day.
Well, good afternoon everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to this steam bar. Once again, you probably don't recognise my face. I'm usually involved in the background of all this, but I've been kindly volunteered to jump up in front. You'll have to excuse us, my first year. In fact, it's the first year for Jade, my small assistant here, and it's Kirsty's second year, so she's the expert, the Premier Road Roller. And the winner of that is Mr. D.G.E. Lomas. To the Town Mayor of Kendal Cup, the Premier Steam Wagon, and it's gone to Mr. P. Walker. The Faulkner Trophy for the Premier Organ goes to Mr. J. Wood. Is Mr. J. Wood about? Thank you very much. Right, we'll move on again to the ASOC Trophy for the Premier Post-War Car, and it's gone to Mr. P. Bell. Right, we're going to the Western Motor Club Trophy for the Premier Small Motorcycle, and it's gone to Mr. J. Rhodes. Right, we move to the L. Bellis and Son Trophy for the Premier Large Motorcycle, goes to Mr. P. Crooks. To the Craig Cup for the Best Cyclist Costume goes to Mr. D. Beveridge. The Trucks Kendal Limited Trophy for the Premier Commercial Vehicle goes to Mr. R.C. Cresswell. Right, Moving on again, we're going to the Alan Burns Memorial Trophy for the Premier Light Commercial Vehicle. Goes to Mr. A. Mackenzie. A. Mackenzie? We're going to the Hakin Trophy for the Premier Pre-War Commercial Vehicle, and it goes to Mr. A. Ellis. Moving on to the Provincial Salver for the Premier Firefighting Appliance goes to Mr. B. Atkinson. Moving on to Class 18, we have the Edward Cup for the Premier Military Vehicle, and it goes to Mr. K. Atkinson. Right now, we're moving on to the Newman Trophy for the Premier Farm Tractor. Goes to Mr. H. Grufford. Right, moving on to the Rutland Trophy for the Premier David Brown Tractor. Goes to Mr. P. Colbert. Right, moving on again for the Phoenix Trophy. The Premier Barn Engine goes to Mr. R. Cook. Right, moving on to Class 22 again. The Amanco Trophy for the Premier Amanco Engine goes to Mr. B. Abbott. Mr. and Mrs. P. They've turned up for the Richard Ransom Award for the Outstanding Steam Exhibit. And would you go to right, moving on to number 23, Class 23, the Sayre Trophy for the Premier Working Engine goes to Mr. B. Whittaker. The Arthur Monkhouse Trophy for the Premier Farm Machine and goes to Mr. S. Morris. We've known this character just a while, but congratulations, Steve. Right, we're going on to the Tony and Tricia Trophy for the Premier Horse-Drawn Exhibit goes to Mr. G. W. Wharton. Mr. Premier Model goes to Miss S. A. Wolf. Miss Wolf? Hey! Nice to see our smaller exhibits winning. Right, we go on to the Wallace Trophy for the Premier Collection goes to Mr. N. Head. Come on, Norman. Congratulations. Well done, Norman. We're going to the Fred Baumer and Richard Alsop Memorial Trophy for young modellers and collectors under 16 years. Goes to Mr. J.R. Woodhouse. J.R. Woodhouse, congratulations, lad. Great. So the best club stand. It's judged by all clubs on a PT basis, and it has gone to the Standard Car Club. And very well dressed gentlemen here as well we have. Congratulations. 29, the Pullwood Cup. Mr. D. Swaite has turned up here. Just go and see our president along there, Tim. A very, very, very special presentation. It's going to a guy called Mike Garstein. He's been about a bit, I think, this lad. Is he better than I do?
Well, thank you, Fenny. Just a few words about this horrible fellow here on my left. 41 years ago, before most of you were born, I rang Mike Garstang up because he was a colleague of mine with the HSE, or the factory inspectors at that time. And I said, you've done a bit of speaking, haven't you? Can you come to the steam gathering and talk about military vehicles? And I gave him an observer's book of military vehicles. And he took it away, and that was his initial knowledge of what the hell was going on here. And he's gone from strength to strength to strength. And 41 years on, he's decided to hang his microphone up. And we are absolutely overwhelmed with everything he's done here and at Kendal before we moved. He's a good lad, really, because Mike and I travelled over the Alps in inclement weather. You think this is inclement? When it's -20, it's even worse. Mike, both you and Ruth, your wife, where is she? Ruth has been his right-hand woman ever since he started, giving him bits of paper with ticks and crosses and hieroglyphics on that exhibitors have written, just to keep the whole ball rolling. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Ruth. This is, take this Kirsty, Mike and Ruth for 40 get it right, memorable years. Well done.
And I grew up with an older brother who was a proper engineer, and he was into vintage cars, so I used to get the job of scraping all the spokes and things, and I learned my engineering that way, helping him repair vehicles. So when Tim came along, he said I was used to speaking. I used to do commentary on motorsport events in this area 40 plus years ago, and it was through the timekeepers that they tipped Tim off, and he asked me to come along and do a bit at the steam gathering. Well, Ruth and I work together on this, and I'm delighted to say that you hear me, but you don't necessarily see the person who sat next to me pushing pieces of paper in front of me saying, not that one, this one. And I know what it's like because I'm an exhibitor as well, and I regularly compete in motorsport events with, well, he's the car class steward here, and we have a lot of fun together. And I know what it's like when you bring something, the commentator kicks off and he gets all the basic facts wrong. So do try and get the basic facts wrong, and then I waffle on for a bit. And when you get weather like this, waffling on sometimes is quite important. So, you know, we've tried over the years, and it's not just about me. Ruth's been very important to me, and over many years we've had a great arena team of stewards, and beyond them, the class stewards. Now, why is that important? It's important particularly on a day like today when you don't know whether anything's going to run or what they are going to run. So they all work together, and it's like, you know, the classic swans, the guy at the top just talking, and underneath there's people running hither, there and everywhere to make it work. So I'm very, very grateful for the society. They put on a super event. Long may it continue. I hope to continue to come in one form or another, but not in commentary. Even I'm sick of the sound of my own voice now. So 40 years, it's been great fun. I'm very, very grateful for the presentation. It was a surprise, actually. I wasn't expecting that today. So thank you very much. And Tim, thank you. You've been a great friend over many years. And long may it last. Thank you very much.
What's your thoughts about today?
It's been a good day, you know. We've come through it very well, really. Forecast was appalling, really. And after 2 wet years, we've had fingers crossed for good weather. So it was overcast this morning, but it was warm and it was quiet. And till about 1:30, 2:30 or something, 1:30. And then it started to spit. And then it's rained for most of the afternoon. But we've managed to keep the show rolling, and everybody's come out and done a bit, including racing camels who've raced on wet ground for us, which it always amazes me here that, you know, people will come and they'll try their hardest. And at the worst of the afternoon, 6 of the veteran bicyclists came out with things that you'd only ever see in a museum and rode them round our field this afternoon. So it's an exceptional place, and I sit here and talk to myself for most of the day, but it's not really me, you know. It's I've got this huge team behind me, technical people and librarians and things, that enable me just to keep talking. Once upon a time, I used to have a team who brought me pints of cider, and that really made it flow. But we're all getting older and can't cope with that these days very easily. So yeah, I think it's not gone too badly today.
What's your thoughts about 40 years?
40 years? Well, I don't know where it's gone, to be honest with you. This is my 40th consecutive steam gathering commentary. I was originally recruited by Tim Holt to do the vintage cars back in 1979, and when I turned up he gave me 3 other classes and said, you can cope with those as well, can't you? Or as he does with many people, I've got a job for thee, and suddenly it gets bigger. But no, we settled into it, and I think in those days my children were about 7 and 3 or something, and they're now 47 and 43, and they grew up coming to the steam gathering, and my grandchildren have grown up coming to the steam gathering. So somewhere in the background there's been family, and we've got friends, so we meet up with people. Sometimes people we only see once a year, and it's like yesterday, as they say, you know. It's there's a whole team spirit here, and people who work very, very hard, and I think I get the easy bit, you know, 2 days of sitting in a comfortable box talking to myself. But we've just had somebody knock on the door and say thanks very much for the commentary and how much they'd enjoyed it. So that happens every now and again, and it really makes it feel worthwhile that between us we've put on a show. And today, that's been, you know, very much about what today's been. We've put on a show despite the weather, and we've managed to keep a crowd. We've managed to keep a full grandstand through a very wet afternoon, so it's gratifying that we're able to do that.
What would be your highlight in 40 years? What stands out as being one of the biggest things that you remember? I mean, I've got mine.
No, I don't. You put me on the spot there, because I think there are many, many things amongst the exhibits, amongst displays that have happened in the arena, and some personal things, you know, things that have happened to us. And I think one of the most touching things, it might sound ridiculous, but we used to have an elderly chap came year after year on a bicycle, and he had a basket on the front. An old gentleman, sit up and beg bicycle, and he'd come in and ride round the arena, and by the back wheel was a black and white sheepdog, and it heeled to his back wheel, and this went on for many years. And then one year he came in and the old dog was in the basket, and the next year he was on his own. And I had to quietly stop doing the commentary because I quietly filled up. It just got to me, and it had gone on for years, this partnership. So yeah, it's odd things that come to mind, but we've had many friends and a lot of cooperation around the field, which has made, you know, we had an arena team that stuck together for many years, and now we've got a new arena team who are doing a really good job. The young people coming through, it's always good to see, you know, when we've got such wonderful exhibits in all of the classes, some real museum pieces, real rarities, that there's young spirit coming through who want to keep the event going. It's time I moved on. I think that's the top and bottom of it. There's a time to go, and after 40 years of talking to myself, even I'm fed up with the sound of my own voice. But yeah, it's you know, I find it a little bit more difficult now, and I just feel it's time for a change, and I'll no doubt continue to turn up stewarding or judging, or I've got one or two schemes in mind. I'm an exhibitor. I can be an exhibitor through cars and bicycles. And I've always fancied doing a Derny display, and if you don't know what that is, turn up next year and you might just see it.
Keep it at that, because nobody will know what a Derny display is. That's lovely. What would be one of your cracking memories?
Well, you know, I've fished around, and on the spot it's very difficult, but suddenly things come to mind, like the sheepdog moment and quite a few other things. I suppose one of the other big moments was, and it's happened twice, we've had a flyover by Battle of Britain Spitfire. And I remember the first time we were told roughly what time it was going to come, roughly, so we were doing our best to keep eyes open. We thought it was going to come in from the east, so looking out of this van east, you're looking out past Grange over towards Ingleton, basically, in Ingleborough. And it was a lovely sunny day, a little bit of high summer cloud, and somebody suddenly said, I think it's coming, and away in the east was a little black dot, and it got bigger and bigger, and suddenly this marvellous thing with a 24-cylinder V8 Merlin engine came whistling in, and it was around about one of the D-Day landing anniversaries, whether it was the 50th or the 60th, I can't remember, because I think it was something like the 70th this year, wasn't it? Something strange. It would be, yeah. No, not quite. Anyway, it was one of those anniversaries, something like that, and he came in, and we'd pre-warned people that we'd be having this fly past, and he came in and basically gave us a complete aerobatic display. And the whole place just came to a standstill, and you could have heard, other than the Spitfire, a pin drop. And it really was, it was spectacular, the sound of this thing and the flight and the timing and everything with the anniversary that it was covering. And he was going all around the country touching various shows and air shows, and he really did give us the benefit. It was just magnificent. So again, you know, we tend to think about land-based things when we come here, and we've had helicopters operating tourist rides and things, but that had to be a big moment, I think, Jim.
Well, one of the nice things, of course, with doing the videos, which I did for 30 years, probably that's how you and me met, and we've been friends ever since, is that we've got that as a memory.
Mm.
We can drag out the DVD, the video, or whatever it is, and we can re-see it, and it's just fabulous to watch.
Yeah. I mean, there's just legions of memories. I can remember when the sealed knot came and took over at Kendal, I think, wasn't it? Sealed knot.
No, it was here.
Was it here? Yeah, it was here in the early days here. And that had to be seen to be believed. They brought tribes of people and had a huge encampment, period encampment, and wandered around the field for days, and then put on a big battle display, and you know, musketry and the whole thing. It was like a movie, really.
Mrs. Garstown, just come here a minute. Yes. You see, you're as much involved in this team, so what's your little involvement?
Mine, I have to spot the numbers of the exhibits coming around the arena and hand Mike the sheet, which doesn't contain very much. It usually contains the name of the vehicle and its
just
year
pass
of,
us one over, and people can just see what it is.
Year of manufacture, and that's it. And then Mike makes the rest up.
I just make it up as I go from memory and experience and a little bit of research. But yes, it's that keeps me right on the facts, and when I do dry up, there's something in front of me, and I'm usually trying to read the wrong one and get my hand slapped for picking up the wrong piece of paper. So my job wouldn't have been as hopefully as good as it may have been if it hadn't been for my able and glamorous assistant.
So you've done 40 years together as a team doing this.
Yeah, we haven't fallen out in here, have we?
No.
Better than at home. Anyway, Jim, you can't go yet. My turn to hold the mic. While I'm sitting here being quizzed, I understand this is your last one. Now, I heard that 4 years ago, but you kept reappearing. You tell me now that this is, in terms of filming the steam gathering, this is probably it, is it?
It definitely is. Maurice has been and helped me for umpteen years while I've been filming. I packed up, Maurice took it over, And it only seemed fair for me to come and just... You don't want to swap money. You don't. Money means nothing. It's much nicer to swap with a friend and give time for a friend exactly the same as what he's done for me. So, yes, I've come and I've filmed, and I know they gave me a little plaque, which was lovely. And I was very touched. But I'm only here as a second. Maurice is the one that's here, and he's going to do all the editing and put it all together. And I still love it. There's a lot of friends. You've made a lot of friends. I've made umpteen friends here as well. And that's just how it should be, to be honest.
And you had an assistant as well for some of this, didn't you? Mrs. Bonus.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
She hasn't come today, which is just as well, because she'd have finished up our note. But Pam's been with me for, probably 26 years, 27 years after the 30 years that I was coming. Yes, she's always been here as well. And she's run around and gone to get a battery, and in the days of tapes, go and get another tape and things like that. And again, we worked as a team as well.
I guess at the end of all this, us two have got to go out like Morton and Wise, disappear over the horizon or something. Okay then, well thank you, Jim.
On behalf of Mike, you and me, it's been lovely having a friend and everything else.
Great stuff. Enjoyed it, Jim.
Thank you, everybody.